Today we're talking about faith and films on Spirit Spire starting right now.
Broadcasting from the Cathedral of the Assumption in Louisville, Kentucky, this is Spirit Spire. And now, here is your host.
Hello and welcome to Spirit Spire for another adventurous episode. I'm joined today with my wonderful co-host and great friend, John Sohl.
Hello, Erik. It's nice to see you again.
I know. I've been gone for a little bit.
I know. I've missed you a lot.
3 or 4 episodes, so it's about a month's worth of time. I don't think people out there know our shooting schedule that well. It's
right.
Top secret, but it's been about a month
quiet.
since I've been here. Just been sick off and on. I wasn't sick that entire time. It seems like on days when we shoot, I think one of those days maybe something else came up, but at least a couple of them. I've been really ill, so it feels really good to be back.
In the land of the living.
Right.
As you texted me last week.
Yeah, back in the land of the living. Oh yeah, last Monday I was really sick.
I know.
I was really sick. Yeah. So there's all I work in a school, so there's all kinds of bugs going around.
That's what my wife assumed. She's like, Johnny just got a job at a school. Like, of course he's going to be sick all the time. He's used to be back in that environment with kids and all of the germs that are there, you know?
It's tough, man.
Yeah.
First year teaching is tough on the immune system.
Dude, I had a year when I started in youth ministry where I was the playground monitor. I don't know if I've ever told you this.
No, I've never heard this.
It's funny.
Yeah.
2014-15 school year. I had just come home from college and seminary, and I'm on fire to become the youth minister of my parishes. And they say, and a way to get some extra money, John, is you could be the playground monitor. So for 2 hours a day, I'd watch over all the kids playing kickball, and when it rained, and we'd have to be inside silent ball, and it was just crazy nuts, like tying shoes and, you know, running up to kids who are screaming and crying, and then they run off laughing, and then other times where you think they're laughing, they're actually crying, and it's really horrible.
Yeah, it's so bad.
It was insane. I learned very quickly that wasn't youth ministry, but being in that environment, you have a tendency to pick up on the germs and all the stuff that happens that way, so.
Did you ever play kickball with them?
Oh, yeah. Of course I did. I had to play kickball all the time, especially when they would break the rules and I'd have to show them. And one class, sadly, had the entire rest of the school year, they were banned from playing kickball because they wouldn't follow the rules. It's pretty rough. But it was one of the most fun years I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, we took our 4th and 5th grade out last week, and man, they really rocked kickball.
Yeah.
I got on base though. I scored. I beat the 4th and 5th graders.
It's my favorite time in grade school. You know, I play kickball all the time.
Kickball is awesome.
I'm sad that they took it away from us in high school. Like, you go to all these Catholic high schools after you graduate 8th grade, and it's like, no more recess. It's time to grow up and be boring. Like, what is that? Like, there's got to be some healthy way of getting energy out. Yeah, getting outside and enjoying life,
yeah,
you know?
Just sitting in class all day is fun. And then you get to college, you can do whatever you want.
Right, and so there's that. I feel like it's almost like go buck wild after that if you don't get the healthy ways of expressing that energy. My solution to college craziness, to help people be more focused in college, I'd say just let them play kickball in high school. Come on. Like, during the day.
Well, you see it. Like, people play ultimate frisbee. They do stuff like that once they get to college. And
Right.
Yeah, because it's something, though, you completely miss.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to
I've never thought about it until just now.
Sports where you sign up and a coach and all the tournaments and all the commitment and money. It can literally just be playing around, and that might be an easier entry point. Because I remember when I was in high school, they emphasized they were trying to get all these guys to play sports. And nothing wrong with that, because that's the way you express it. But some people aren't going to want to do that.
Yeah, I'm a long game type of guy.
Yeah.
I like Cube, remember? Yeah,
Playing Cube, that's another fun game. There's lots of stuff. But anyway,
let's get
into the topic of today.
Refocus. I thought the topic of today is one that I've been wanting to do for a long time. We talked to Father Matthew Hardesty not so long ago, and he talked about being involved with an upcoming film, and that opened the door to morals and ethics and virtues, Catholic themes, maybe even in movies. And there was so much there that I really wanted to explore and chat about movies with him. Maybe we'll get him back on and do that. But I thought that we could expand on that theme today and talk about, Catholic themes in movies. So there's many different ways we could go about this. I kind of want to keep it open.
I like this.
So we can roll down whatever road is presented before us. The reason it came back up and what really reminded me of it is I've told you I was sick. So I'm not a big movie guy anymore. Probably 10 years ago, I watched a lot of movies, and before that. But in the last 10 years, I don't really watch a lot of films. I read a lot. I try to keep everything as low tech or no tech as possible in my house. David, my son, he's 15 months now. He hasn't seen a lot of TV. And when it's on at other places that we visit, other people's houses, luckily he's not really interested in it. He's an outdoors guy. But we were both ill, so we watched The Lion King. And I watched the original Disney cartoon version, and then they had kind of a newer remake in the last couple of years that I hadn't seen.
You watched both of them?
I watched both. So
Dude, that's amazing.
It was like a 4-hour jaunt through the Sahara. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, and so when I was watching the movie, what I picked up on in both films is that the beginning part of The Lion King, the opening song, The Circle of Life, which I know that you're big on.
Yes, I had a whole youth group named The Circle of Life Youth, right? That was the whole point. Now, it wasn't because of The Lion King. It came for other reasons, but that certainly helped,
Yeah, so The Circle of Life, the song, it evokes the 3 theological virtues in the song, and that stood out to me right away.
That is amazing that those are the lyrics, and Elton John wrote that. Yeah, right? That's so crazy to me. So it's beautiful.
I always thought the music, even as a kid, was really good in The Lion King. So theological virtues invoked at the beginning, and then the first scene has Rafiki, who's kind of
he's like the spiritual character, almost like the priest figure, but not to compare.
Very sacerdotal. He is very sacerdotal. Yeah.
Yes, very much.
So he's a very priestly.
There's a mystical dimension to
character. Yeah, absolutely. And he gives the spiritual guidance, obviously, to Simba later on.
Right.
He's a little bit nutty. In some parts, you question sometimes.
Have you ever had a spiritual director you kind of questioned a little bit, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. So those themes stuck out to me in the original, but when I watched the new one, have you seen it?
I have, but I didn't really remember it as much. So I never watched them back to back. I think that'd be a fun thing to
I think they're so similar. Like, really? It really expresses the same movie over again. They even the new voice actors, I think they keep James Earl Jones.
Oh, that's so cool.
As Mufasa in both. But the other voice actors are so reminiscent of the original. And even though it's CGI and live action, it's still a cartoon. Like, they're just a better, more realistic cartoons, animation style, really.
Yeah.
But in the new one, they do a better job of contrasting Simba's life before he leaves the Pride Lands to his life when he's with Timon and Pumbaa. I'd say that's the biggest difference between the two films. Is it's kind of inferred that he grows up with Timon and Pumbaa and they have a different philosophy on life, the Hakuna Matata thing. That's not how he's raised.
Right.
With the lions and Mufasa.
Yeah, they're totally different lifestyles.
Yeah, in this movie, it shows that, and it goes into greater depth to show. So the circle of life is, like we kind of touched upon, there's a spiritual element to that. When they hold Simba up at the beginning of the movie, in both movies, that light comes from heaven onto Simba.
Does that not, like, scream and remind you of baptism? on
Yeah,
some level.
absolutely. And you've got a priest kind of holding them
And
up.
literally, I have been at baptisms, and now I wonder to myself if some of the priests are actually thinking of the Lion King nowadays because they're post-movie. But I wonder, like, there's that presentation of the new child, new member of the body of Christ, new member of the community, for all those to witness and see.
I laugh pretty hard every time they lift them up.
Anytime
everybody's like, it's a Lion King thing. Yeah.
Right.
But I think that you're very much correct in saying that there's baptismal themes at the beginning. He's anointed. And remember, again, whenever Rafiki anoints even that image of Simba on the tree and stuff. So he has some kind of anointing there. And then I think that in that pool scene, and I'm talking about the original
cartoon where Rafiki tells him that his father's alive, and he's like, no, he died many years ago. He's saying, no, he's alive, and I will show him to you. And then he takes him on this journey, and he runs through the jungle and up and down hills, and it's dark, and he can't see, and all of a sudden he stops.
It's a baptismal scene with that water and stuff. I always thought it was a cop-out when I was a kid that, it is just his reflection. But then he does hear Mufasa's voice.
Yeah, and then he sees a huge vision of him in the clouds. I think of like the apparitions of Mary and Joseph. I mean, even Jesus to Saint Faustina. Like, there are tangible experiences that are mystical in nature, but people who have lived historical lives, they're literally people who were on earth that had eyewitness testimony of these visions, documented journals, and other people who were affected by these experiences. That, to me, a cartoon expression of that mystical vision was expressing, right? And even if they don't see it themselves and don't necessarily connect it to the Catholic dimension of reality, I believe it's worth mentioning that Mufasa was like God the Father. But obviously God the Father can only be seen and fully understood in relationship with God the Son in Jesus Christ, right? As he even said to the apostles, when you have seen me, you've seen the Father.
Yeah. Right?
And so when Rafiki's saying he lives in you, I am just like, this is communion. This is the depth of our faith, but you can't reduce it to just that spiritual element or that new agey attitude that I think some people get from that messaging, right? Yeah. You have to be careful.
And I think that was the thing that struck me is I assumed that there would be some new agey, loosey-goosey spirituality in it to some degree.
In the remake?
In both.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
But the more I watched both of them, there was some really solid stuff. So the biggest thing, like I said, that was distinct in the new movie is Timon and Pumbaa and their lifestyle. There's other characters who live with Timon and Pumbaa. It's not just them. There's other animals who live in this habitat. And Timon and Pumbaa, so the circle of life's explained. We understand that. That's where Simba comes from. He has a place in that. He has a destiny. He has a duty to fulfill his role in a rightly ordered way. Mm-hmm. And that's what the whole purpose of life is fulfilling that.
Your call, your vocation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is a circle of life. And the life aspect that Timon and Pumbaa have is they even say, like, we're nihilists. In the movie.
I know, he even says it.
He says it in the new one that I'm a nihilist. So they're like someone tries to explain to them the circle of life and that meaning, that depth to life. And they have kind of the perspective that I think most people my age genuinely hold, the view they hold of, they're like, life isn't a circle. They draw a line in the dirt. They're like, you live, and then you stop living, and that's the end of the line, and you're dead, and that's it.
That is so sad and meaningless.
Yeah.
Right.
So they really push back on Simba with that. Around the time I think that Nala, the other lion, shows back up, and reintroduces Simba to his proper place and his rightly ordered duty in life, and he answers that call obviously saves the other lions.
Yeah, it's a hero's journey.
Yeah,
right?
it's in. I think there's some of these deep archetypes in Lion King that I thought, wow, I thought this was just a silly movie from whenever I was a kid.
Right, and you think of Simba going back into the battle, of his uncle's betrayal and all the terrible things that happened to him. And it's almost like when terrible things happen to you when you're a kid, and you just kind of absorb them. You learn them. And in the same way as when good things and beautiful things, when you're being ordered and raised properly, you absorb those things. But there comes a point in your life, in every young person's life, where they have to make a personal choice, a decision of what is their faith going to be, how are they going to live it out, so that Simba then is entering intentionally back into home, knowing it's a corrupted, broken system, that he then has to reestablish order. And to do so, he has to be willing to make sacrifices. So he's on some level entering Calvary, just as Christ, if he's going to be seen as a Christ figure in that decision, in that choice, right? Not living a nihilistic life, right? But the search, I think, is something that we all find within ourselves. Where is Christ in the depths of our hearts, and how is he calling us to live out our true purpose?
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's good. That's a good one.
So, I mean, there's certain, I think that's a good example of finding those themes while watching, more secular movies, popular movies that are known to everyone. There's also the theme of there's explicitly religious movies.
Well, of course, right.
Like God's Not Dead type of thing on the
or,
lower end.
Fireproof, the movie.
Fireproof.
I remember these.
Is there
Courageous about men. That's a good one.
What's the one where there's that woman and she has a prayer room? It's like her
War Room.
War Room. Yeah,
that one's good.
I've seen that. The pure flicks type of movies, which you can tell they're not Hollywood movies.
Right.
There's definitely the faith theme, but there's something they definitely lack.
But they're very explicit in their theme, and there's not always a whole lot of depth of character or plot all the time.
There are like 6 God's Not Dead now. Like there's a ton of them.
Right. And again, not to call them out, because I loved some of them, as I grew up.
God's Not Dead 5. He's still not dead.
Well, I don't know if I watched all those, but I did enjoy Fireproof. I enjoyed Courageous. Only because it was explicit faith-based messaging that I needed at those particular times in my life.
I think some of those movies are getting a lot better. Did you see the I Can Only Imagine movie?
I've not. I've wanted to. I've heard a lot about it.
About the song. The
Isn't Dennis Quaid in that movie?
Yeah.
So that to me,
it's a good flick.
Is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it was a good movie.
Cool.
Has some big actors. The Flannery O'Connor movie we were talking about. Could be a push in that direction, and Catholic too.
And see, to me, that's an indicator of the movement of the Spirit, even within Hollywood culture. It was almost like we had to have that initial origin of, intentions of goodness and truth and beauty and trying to preserve innocence, right? I remember the stories of like Shirley Temple in the early 1930s. They wouldn't, any adult language or behavior, they would try to keep out of her field of vision whenever she was in the studio getting ready to perform.
Yeah.
And I think that was very honorable. Today, I don't know how much they would do that with kids, sadly.
It's terrible, yeah.
And so you see the fall, and yet now I see these are the signs to me of resurrection. Father Stu is another great example.
But that's a really
obviously
harsh movie.
Though it's an example of bare bones reality.
Yeah,
so I wouldn't take a 5, 6, 8-year-old with me to see that movie, right?
But it's very real, and it has one of the best scenes of a Marian apparition I've ever seen in a movie.
Yes. It was right. Yes, I forgot about that. It was unexpected.
When he wrecks the motorcycle. Yeah, because the scenes up to it were so
benign.
Vulgar.
It was just kind of like,
there's a lot of vulgarities.
What's going on? Who is this guy?
This accident.
I didn't even know the plot, and then all of a sudden, boom, that happens to him, and then all of a sudden Mother Mary's appearing. I'm like, where did that come from?
I thought it was so good.
It was well done.
And then, so there's those movies. I think that Christ as Logos is present in any of these movies, just as he is in any works, whether they're explicitly Christian or not. I used to think that if something was Christian or Catholic or faith based, that it would be more like those other movies we were talking about, not the non-Hollywood ones.
Right.
But now I'm finding more and more in like high art, in high art movies, that you have those themes. What's coming to mind right now is Hacksaw Ridge.
That is one of the most excellent movies ever made.
Just such a good movie. The Terrence Malick movie, Tree of Life, I talk about.
I know. I still have to see that.
That's a great movie. 2011. It's got Brad Pitt in it, right?
Yeah. Yes, it does. And then Gattaca, which is what Father Hardesty was talking about in his episode.
With the themes.
Yeah, very good, solid
moral
stuff.
themes. Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah,
it's a great movie. So those threads running through, but even in Hollywood, I guess you've always had like both of those, because I'm thinking of like old movies that have obviously like A Wonderful Life or something.
It's A Wonderful Life, I think, is one of those
great themes.
Classic movies. Right?
I know it has angels and deaths at the center, but I don't consider it to really have a Christian explicit.
No, I wouldn't say it's direct and intentional. I think it's more. It flopped when it came out in theaters in 1945.
It's a long movie.
It is a long movie. You have to be invested in it, but it's also one of those that I think has become a beautiful classic because of the end and the demonstration of love, of community in the midst of absolute despair, when you aren't even aware of the impact that you've made in life, right? That's the overarching messaging.
And Bert and Ernie are in the movie.
And of course, Bert and Ernie, or at least the characters who inspired Bert and Ernie.
the names.
And I always grew up watching that because it was a classic. And I don't know if you ever heard this story, but they made this movie in the 40s, and it flopped, didn't get anywhere. And by the 1970s, the copyright for the movie was coming back up, and a guy that all he had to do was pay like $6 or $8
in the 70s.
To re-up the copyright of the movie, didn't do it. They just decided, who cares? And so that's why ABC, NBC, Hallmark, all these channels were able to pick it up for nothing and play it all the time during the Christmas season, which exposed millions of people to this movie, and it became one of those classics that people loved. Do you know what that actor's name is? Not Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart. There's another Jimmy Stewart movie called like The Shop Down the Street or something.
Yeah.
It's also in Christmas time. Mm-hmm. That's a really good movie where he's like got this pen pal girlfriend.
What? Wait, I think they made a remake of that with Tom Hanks. I can't remember that. And that's called You've Got Mail, right? Yeah. Is it the same plot, basically, similar?
Yeah, there's two. There's another one in between, too, from the one I'm talking about is like the 30s or 40s or something. There's one from like the 50s or 60s called In the Good Old Summertime. That's like a musical version. That's also equally excellent.
Yeah. It's a good plot.
The original, where they don't... There's like a guy and a girl, and they work together.
Yeah,
and they hate each other.
They hate each other, right?
And they're competitive. They don't like each other.
They're kind of from different worlds, different perspectives,
but both of them have a girlfriend and boyfriend that, respectively, that's a pen pal, and they're really writing love letters to each other. And they're like, "I'm getting engaged soon, so I don't have to put up with this and all that." Right. I think the guy gets the upper hand. He sees her waiting and figures it out first. In most of them,
Yeah. I love that, though.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart does really good in that one, too. The thing is that... But there's also the explicitly Catholic movies from that time. The Song of Bernadette. Have you seen that one?
Is that the classic of Our Lady of Lourdes?
Yeah, that movie? The black and white one.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, these are movies I grew up watching.
It's got Vincent Price in it.
Really?
Yeah, he's so good in it.
Dude, it's been so long.
It's one of the best parts of that movie.
We're talking about early childhood. You kind of absorb a lot of these because your mom and dad are showing them to you, and you see them. And you see so many of them if you like I did. I remember watching Jesus King of Kings. I remember watching the Ten Commandments. I watched this obscure one called Barabbas. Like, who was Barabbas and what did he do after Jesus was crucified, and it followed his whole life.
Was he saintly, or did he
he eventually had a conversion and, you know, powerful experience.
That would make it for a better movie, yeah.
Right. But it was all made in the 50s, you know, 60s, that kind of style.
That Song of Bernadette movie has got a crazy story. It's really good. So it's one of those that's explicitly Catholic, but it's like also high art form, in my opinion, because it's so good.
Yeah.
What happened and why it exists in that manner is Franz Werfel, the playwright who wrote ultimately ended up being the screenplay of Song of Bernadette. I think it might have been a book before. It's either a book or a play. I can't remember. But if you read the preface on how he wrote the story and how it came to be, he was this playwright, I believe in Austria, Jewish. And World War II, Nazi invasion, he had to escape to France. Well, he couldn't get out of France to get to Iberia, to get to Spain or Portugal, to get off the continent.
Yeah.
A lot of Jewish people got kind of trapped out in the countryside, and they're rounding them up.
Gosh.
So he ended up hiding out in the French countryside and ended up at Lourdes, a generation or two removed from the apparitions, right? So probably 2 generations, like people's grandmothers told them stories about, and mothers told them stories about this happening. So it was still fresh in the mind of the people of Lourdes. So he was like, if I ever get out of here, even though he's not Catholic, if I ever get out of here, he like made a promise to God, like, I'll tell the story of Bernadette.
Wow.
And so you get the greatest playwright of the time in that position that like owes a debt of gratitude to the people of Lourdes and to Saint Bernadette, and he writes this amazing script.
He does, right?
And the movie, I think, is fantastic.
Right, because so he would have been trapped. So it was the 1850s when the apparitions happened. So this would have happened to him in his life, where he would have made that
1930s, 1940s,
1930s or 40s. So people would have still been alive from those days. Possibly.
Yeah.
Or even if they had just recently died, they would have passed these stories on to their kids and grandkids.
There were living people who knew and grew up with people alive in the story.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that to me is profound.
Yeah.
And it's like anything they do of Fatima. Like my grandpa was born in 1913. And he wrote a journal when he was 77 years old, just the memoirs of his life. And he wrote about recalling Fatima when he was 4 years old. He remembers the headlines and the things happening. That was my grandfather.
I don't know if it got out before.
He was 4 years old, and he remembers people talking about it.
Even then? Yeah, that's early.
So this is like
Because I think
profound.
I think he got forgotten and buried outside of Portugal for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. We're talking about the initial miracle. I mean, when it happened, 70,000 people would have been there. It would have made headlines initially.
Oh yeah, it was big.
And so he remembers those conversations, and then, when he's reflecting on his life in the late 1980s, early 90s, he's recalling all of this. Right? He died in 1998, but I've never forgotten that, and I have his words as proof of what he wrote. And he wrote it on a typewriter. Actually, he wrote it by hand, and my grandma, my mom's dad wrote it by hand, and my dad's mom, my grandma, typed it for him before he died, which was such a gift to him to see that. If he had lived to see YouTube, he would have been a billionaire, probably. One of those crazy old guys like making funny videos.
We might need to do an episode with some of his entries.
Oh, that would be so cool.
I know that's a little personal.
I don't know how much in depth he went into Fatima. It's been a long time since I've read his memoirs, but he definitely wrote enough to remember it, which is pretty cool.
I mean, that's another one of those. I think the Song of Bernadette is, like I said, a masterpiece, classic movie on its own. The Miracle of Fatima, the movie.
The
old
1950s,
60s one.
Black and white.
It's a pretty good movie, but it's not. I don't think it's the same. It's not the same caliber.
Any depiction, any movie that's ever been produced, even up to the most recent one that came out a couple years ago,
the Fatima movie,
has ever perfectly captured what Sister Lucia saw with those two.
I really disliked the new one. A lot of people loved it.
I know. It could have been better. I thought it was cast well for the most part. I think there were certain elements of the story that were missing.
And the angel being like some like
right
cave lady was a little weird. Like it was just an odd artistic character.
Yeah, right.
Like they saw an actual angel. And they received first communion from an angel. They
should have had that happen to them. But the miracle of the sun was just this big Technicolor thing in the movie. But they saw Mary, Joseph, holding the baby Jesus, and he was blessing the world. Where was that? Those are very important things that were missed. That I just feel like we're still waiting for.
Yeah, right? I think the trailer like really showed. I thought they were going to really have it because in the trailer it showed like the third secret and stuff. Looked really good. The music was great.
They made it. There's a lot of hype for it. I was really excited.
It was a little. It could have been better.
Right.
I think it had to be delayed.
People to the value of the message of Fatima, even for today's times, that may have otherwise not really paid much attention to it.
It was one of 2 movies I watched during the pandemic.
Yeah.
That were new.
Right.
That one, which was explicitly Catholic.
Yeah.
I think it had better production value, like a Hollywood movie, but it was like a Catholic version of one of those kind of Pureflix ones.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
about. But I think it definitely had the production value and the script and editing of every bit of a Hollywood film. The other movie I watched was a film called North Hollywood. It had Vince Vaughn and Miranda Cosgrove in it.
Really?
It's like an R-rated coming-of-age skateboarder movie kind of thing.
It's rally, literally.
It has, it was really good. The guy wants to be a pro skater. He's like just graduating high school and has a girlfriend, and I don't know. It's a comedy. It's pretty funny. Vince Vaughn's great in it as the dad. But the movie had the character's Catholic in the movie. And whoever wrote the movie, I don't think was Catholic, but had a lot of respect for the church and for Catholics. For instance, like the character will like pray in contemplation. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied today.
Yeah.
But he'll like make the sign of the cross and just sit there quietly. Like you don't know what he's praying about. It doesn't say it explicitly, but he's praying. He gets beat up, and he like goes to the church, and there's nuns there to take care of him. Like that wouldn't really happen.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, it'd be so culture. Cool. They act like being an altar server was like his job. Like he was getting paid like enough money, and the priest like sits him down, has this conversation and the priest is played by a pro skater in the movie. But he like sits him down and he's like, he says something like, unless you're going to go into seminary, we can't continue to pay you to be an altar server. I'm like, that's not
how that works.
And then when they receive communion, they say amen after they receive it on the tongue. So it's like on their tongue, and then they say amen.
It's
like you need to do a little bit more
research on
but
that.
Like I said, it's very respectful. I thought it was good that it was very respectful, I think, of the church.
That's cool that they had that though in there, because you don't always see that depicted on any respectful level, right?
No.
Usually either dark, mysterious, archaic, and irrelevant, or you see it depicted as overly loose and also irrelevant when it's depicted. But like when I saw Nefarious, for instance.
Yeah. How was that? I haven't seen it. I'm
very intense.
I'm going to see it tomorrow, so
very intense, very powerful. But I just think when they brought in when they took the Catholic angle during the short time they did, it just could have been done better. I felt like they misrepresented the church, but yet at the same time, I felt that they perfectly represented the church in some way with certain
don't spoil it.
People, and I'm not going there because you haven't seen it. I won't do that to you, but it's definitely worth watching and seeing. But I definitely felt that they could have done a better job at that point as well as at the end. The end will kind of throw you off, and you'll be like, "What is even happening?" Especially if
Sounds like 2001: A Space Odyssey. Have you seen that?
a long time ago. Gosh, that's so. It reminds me of Lost in Space and things like that. My dad always I grew up with Dad watching Star Trek.
Yeah,
The TV show, and then they made those movies about
Do you
it.
remember the one? I just saw a clip from Star Trek that I haven't seen in a long time, where Star Trek tackled racism, and it was such a good episode. They go to this planet, and there's these people, and half of them are like painted fully white on one side and black on the other. And the other one are like black on the right side and white on this side. And the people who are black on the right side and white on the left side are racist against the people who are black on the left side and the right side.
That's hilarious.
And like they're sitting there talking to him. And it's just like, obviously you can tell this is made in the 60s. It's like...
yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of tension there.
That way.
But like in Star Trek... the way that they play it out is like so good because it just makes like explicit racism so dumb. Like if anybody's watching that, they're like,
it really.
So like the people are like, they're like, we don't really see the difference between you two.
You
like
two
you're both whatever this people of the race of this planet are.
And that's not to say we don't see the difference, but it's to say that.
Well, they don't know.
They're
like
focus on that.
And the guy's like, no, you don't get it. They're black on the right side and white on the left side, and we're black on the left side and white on the right side. And like,
who cares?
Yeah, it was like, but it made you think like all the differences and the distinctions and the problems that we were probably encountering as a country then and even now.
Right.
It's just like, man, if you're willfully choosing to detest someone,
yes,
based on pointless, part of it is they're you got to give dignity where it's due. Part of it is part of their character and who they are as individuals.
Right.
But like, it just shows if you're hating on people especially because of some physical appearance or something like this, it's so silly.
It like it's the pigmentation of your skin, and it's based on obviously where you grew up and where you were born, but it's also based on the sun and its ability to, permeate into the skin pigmentation of people over time in a way. And again, I don't know exactly. I'm not going to get all scientific on this, but it literally has nothing to do with the person or their worth, right? It has everything to do maybe with their sense of identity and their sense of belonging in some way, but not in a belonging that divides and segregates, but in a belonging that uplifts, inspires, and makes them feel loved. And that's the point. And
it's part of what makes them unique, too.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. But I, as you were talking about that, I thought of, many people today will look at America is fundamentally racist, fundamentally flawed, and that's very, very sensitive and painful, reality. But I wouldn't even necessarily call it a reality, more like the reality that people believe that, right?
Sure.
I look at America as not fundamentally flawed because that's like saying human beings are absolutely, utterly depraved, and we are fallen, and we are certainly depraved in the sense of the choices we made and the sin we inherited from our parents. Sure. But you go back in the Garden of Eden, there was an original innocence before the original sin. And so with this, I think of like the movie The Patriot. One of my all-time favorites, Mel Gibson.
It's real rough, that scene where he kills
that guy with the hatchet. Oh my gosh.
It's a rough scene.
It is, but it speaks to the depth of his pain, his agony at losing his son seconds before, or moments before. And this, of course, starts us on this whole movie of his hero's journey because he was the pacifist who wanted to kind of run away from the conflict.
Yeah.
And he was drawn into the very heart of the conflict. And I think of just the fundamental foundational principles of our country. Yes, they were definitely slaves that were owned, but they were also people fighting against it even back then, recognizing the dignity of human beings.
Sure.
It wasn't just black versus white. There were Chinese slaves, there were white slaves, there were people. It really comes down to people objectifying other people and using them as possessions and objects to do things that they don't want to do themselves, or it's about money and power, and it's really just rooted in absolute evil. It's not
sin, yeah.
And sin. That's what it comes down to. But I don't know. That's its own topic, and I know we talked a lot about that with the Archbishop and others. But the movies, I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this speaks to the power and influence of media on helping people see the dignity of others or skew their ability to see the dignity of others. I think movies are critically important in conveying the beauty, the truth, and the goodness of the human story, the human person. But I think oftentimes people will fall into habits of watching movies, consuming media that degrades, that divides, that destroys, and they get fascinated with it in an unhealthy way. Well, that's all they watch.
Well, we were talking about like that nihilistic philosophy versus
do whatever feels good.
Yeah,
first it means no worries.
You're gonna you have the straight line and then you die and nothing you do really matters. And I think that a lot of people, because they subscribe to that, get into this consumer mindset. I need to consume all this media. I need to consume all these Netflix shows. And this is what my life is, a big part of what it's about. And that's probably, once movies started to be geared towards that, and took away from those themes of virtue.
Yes.
And these old archetypes of good that really help us and guide us in life. I think that might be, 10 years ago when I started to fall off on movies. I think the best example, and obviously this is so controversial, it's not controversial anymore, is the Star Wars The Last Jedi movie. where they made, like,
that was ridiculous.
Even Mark Hamill didn't like what they did with Luke Skywalker. They made him so nihilistic and defeated, and he never has a redemption. He's just sad all the time, and like it's just so bad.
Kind of pathetic.
At the beginning of the movie, they had like these heroic characters who just die.
Yes.
They're like introduce you to these heroes, and then they just die right at the beginning of the movie. It's just a defeatist mentality. And then, was it J.J. Abrams made the ones on either side? And the first movie, The Force Awakens in 2015, I thought it was a pretty good movie. There was a lot about it that wasn't original, and that was the biggest criticism. But I really liked the movie. I thought, man, they're bringing Star Wars back. Here's a good foundation that he's laid to build on. And then the Rian Johnson movie was literally just making fun of the movie before it. And it's like, I think some of what we've talked about too is if you take a perspective now that everything that's come before us in society and culture is bad and everything that's new is good, it's not true. Like, I'm not saying that and it's equally wrong to have some antiquarian perspective, recidivist perspective that says that the past is where it's at and the future is bad. We need to keep moving forward. But I think, people say that the church moves slowly on things. I think that the church, especially in this regard, is very balanced.
Yes, I agree.
There's been times in history where things got worse. And ideologies emerged that were worse. For instance, the modern version of slavery is the modern version of, like we talked about, it's the modern version of slavery for a reason. It was a grave evil that came up later in human history. Now, there's ancient practices that were similar, but there's some gaps. And like things like we take technology for granted. Our technology tomorrow might not be better than today. Like I said, I don't think our movies are as good as 2013.
I agree. I don't think our movies are as good as they were in the 1980s.
Yeah, well, the 80s are kind of the golden age, but I think that they were still doing good in the 90s,
Yeah,
2000s.
the 90s were good too, right? Don't get me wrong.
2000s.
It was once there was a point where they started reaching beyond the trilogy, entering into the let's create our own universes, where it wasn't let's tell a story. It was about let's make money.
I can't watch another Marvel movie or Star Trek movie. Dude. I've seen too many of them.
Yes, there was a point, like, I have to say something about Marvel, because I love Marvel. I loved it when I started watching it back in 07, 08. Remember
the Iron Man movie?
Iron Man, the very first one.
That was a really good movie.
That was right in the same era of Pirates of the Caribbean, and they were all epic every time. And they were, and you were super excited for the next one. And it was the first real experience of them telling a story that then you felt there wasn't just going to be one or two.
Even Star Wars then, it was like every 3 years you had like a new Star Wars movie. You had to wait like 3 years.
You had to wait for the next, right? So there was still this anticipation. And then and it seemed every single Marvel movie was epic and amazing.
I feel like that first Hulk movie was bad.
The Hulk, but that was the count that as part of the saga. They tried to, but it was a different actor. It didn't work.
Yeah.
It was a fail. But so I consider the very first effort of them building this universe with Iron Man because of where it led with Endgame. And obviously you would have to watch all of the essentials to really get the full story to appreciate it. Yeah. But the way Iron Man literally gave himself to this cause toward, saving everyone and all of the efforts.
Sacrificial.
It's very sacrificial. It's a Christ figure moment. And think of masculinity. Iron sharpens iron. I saw that immediately as I was watching him on the big screen make this massive, it was a profoundly masculine moment. Whereas when he started his journey, he was the epitome, or not the epitome, but the antithesis of masculinity, because he was the womanizer who was sleeping with every woman, doing drugs, drinking all the time. He was the richest man in the world.
He was the most selfish guy,
and the most wealthy weapons manufacturer in the world. And then, yet he learned the ultimate weapon was unconditional sacrificial love and the outpouring of his entire self for the good of all humanity. That is a true Iron Man, because he was imitating Christ, the ultimate Iron Man, who sharpens all of us, right? That to me was profound. Then they pulled it off again where they did the whole Spider-Man thing, and they went back before even Iron Man and did the whole Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield,
that was
thing.
good.
That was really cool. Since then, and even many of the movies between, while they told the story, some of these movies are not essential. Don't even watch them. They're not worth your time. They're goofy, but it just feels like now it's just about making money. They told the story, and the next generation is not really gonna appreciate Marvel the way we received it initially.
And like the things that Hollywood, and I'm even thinking of during the Cold War, the Soviet filmmakers, that's an atheistic communist government deeply in error, but what they were willing to do for art is, I think the commercialization's the problem, because I don't think Hollywood's willing to take the risks for art that they used to be. Like the Soviets, I remember War and Peace is like my favorite book. I know that's cliche, because it's like such a, people make jokes about War and Peace and how long it is, but really relate to the character of Pierre and that journey he goes through. But the War and Peace, they did like the Battle of Austerlitz and all these battles in the Soviet era. It was like across 4 movies, and like some of the camera angles, and they filmed from helicopters, and they literally had the entire Soviet army dress up as French and Russian soldiers and like ride horses, and like there's literally people on horseback as far as the eye can see, and Napoleon's out there. And
that's risk. You got to really work hard to get that kind of stuff to happen.
Smolensk and all that stuff, and it's just insane and incredible, and I just don't think that like I don't think a movie like that could be created ever again.
No, because most of it's CGI. They don't spend the human effort because
and it's based off of War and Peace, which is thought of as like the most boring thing ever.
Right.
But it is just true art. And it's mostly CGI.
Yeah. That speaks to what who's the actor of Gandalf? His name Ian McKellen. He had said apparently something when they were filming The Hobbit because he was kind of upset and disillusioned by some of the experience of that. Even though I loved The Hobbit because
I liked the first one. I liked when the guy who plays Sylvester McCoy, who plays Radagast, has those rabbits on a sled. That was so cool.
That was cool. I loved just being in the world of Tolkien again in a way that was mostly faithful to the story, right?
Obviously, there was
extra
faithful
things that they added and love interest that didn't even exist. That was the thing that killed everybody.
The dwarf like love interest with like the elf.
Right, it's like that wouldn't happen.
It was like super weird.
It was, and
it was forced.
So some of that stuff, was forced.
And also, he wondered in the first movie before he meets the elf lady, like why did they make this one dwarf like not have a dwarf nose and a dwarf beard and made him handsome?
Probably because they wanted him.
Because they wanted to make him a love interest in a later movie.
That's so funny. But Ian McKellen said he didn't get in acting for this. And what he was saying is they were in big green screens and they were doing things that were not even real, that weren't even like, they just did a few things and then it was all CGI after that. Even the actor, even their body wasn't even real anymore. And it's just like, are we literally just going back to watching cartoons and that's all that exists?
That's what I was thinking with that Lion King movie.
Books, and that's the original way of animation. That to me is a sad reality. It's not how it should be. And I'm not, again, knocking the beauty of The Hobbit because I loved it for the sake of being, a prequel to The Lord of the Rings, which we know was so epic.
It was so good.
So incredible.
Even, especially the Fellowship with the more practical effects.
Yeah, it's practical effects.
Did you know, I had heard this rumor that Peter Jackson hadn't read the books, that he was... that he based it off of the 1977, 79... Not the Rankin Bass one, the Ralph Bakshi, Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
And part of that makes sense because there's scenes that exist in both those films that aren't in the book. Like, when they're over in the Black Riders are like stabbing, and then it turns out to be pillows, and they're really across the street at the other end.
That wasn't in the.
That's not in the book at all.
Right.
Yeah. So but that is in the cartoon.
That's funny. Well, it's possible then that he. Okay, I'm gonna probably assume Peter Jackson did read the books. But maybe not.
I don't know.
But at the same time, maybe he read the books and also watched the cartoon. I like this better than what they did in the book. Well, and maybe that's what he did, but still.
Sure.
I love Lord of the Rings because it creates this incredible paradigm of witnessing in a mythical, legendary, and adventurous way the absolute overthrowing of evil. And good triumphing for all posterity, right? In the ultimate sense, the definitive salvation we all long for, in a visual way, right? So to me, it's like the Christian Catholic worldview on screen, obviously in a different way than it's lived out in practical human experience, right? But still beautiful.
What's your favorite moment in The Lord of the Rings across all of it? In book, movie?
Favorite moment of Lord of the Rings? Goodness gracious. There's so much depth to this, but I would have to look at the moment of them on... the two moments. The first moment is their last moment on Mount Doom.
Yeah.
When he, not just when he says, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you, but after, when they're laying there and the lava's spewing out and the eagles come and rescue them, and it's just this.
And everybody's like, why didn't they just ride the eagles there?
Right. But it's this profound, just they laid down their lives. They gave their whole selves, and God rescued them in the end. It was a resurrection moment. So the very next moment, they even saw each other after passing out on a spewing volcano of death where they should have been cooked alive, was when Frodo wakes up in the bed and everyone comes in, and he didn't even know Gandalf was alive, you know. And then after everyone is reunited and they're just laughing and crying and screaming for joy, he sees Sam. And there's this profound mutual understanding of what they encountered and endured together. I think of that as the communion of saints, of heaven, you know, opening up for us when we have given our last full measure of devotion, right? As quoted in Saving Private Ryan, another classic. And I think that was Abraham Lincoln writing a letter that set the whole tone for that movie. But I digress. The whole point is to give your whole self to the cause of your vocation of ultimate love, in trust that you will receive that ultimate love and bliss for all eternity in heaven with the faithful departed, family and friends, and the communion of saints to welcome you home. That's what Lord of the Rings is for me, and those two scenes perfectly show that, you know? Because sometimes I feel like I'm literally laying in a lava waste and wondering when I'm going to die, you know?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I get glimpses of that ultimate redemption. What about you?
I recall from the books, is it Boromir's brothers, Faramir, right?
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. Faramir and then Eowyn, don't they end up together?
Eowyn, yeah, from Rohan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
I think that had a lot of depth in that relationship in the book. And
that's good.
I think she was a lot cooler. Like, she was cooler in the book and in the Rankin Bass movie. She's like, no man am I. And I thought that part was always sick. Like, that's probably one of my highlight moments is when the Hobbit and the lady take out that Nazgul.
Dude, that's like Mary crushing that as a serpent.
Yeah, it's a great scene. Great moment. I feel like there's a lot of depth there in the book that doesn't get translated onto screen. Yeah, a lot of people talk about Tom Bombadil.
I'm sad that he's not in that.
What's his horse? Is Fatty Lumpkins? Is the name of the horse? And like that's great. And
the profundity is that Tom Bombadil wasn't affected. He's the only character that's not affected in any way by the ring.
Seemingly,
right.
But he wasn't willing to do anything with it because it could make him evil, right? Wasn't that the thing?
Well, as far as I sensed, it didn't have any effect on it. Now, I might be wrong because I've only read it once. I don't know.
Well, maybe that was Gandalf.
There's a lot of depth to his character. Right. Gandalf wouldn't take it because he didn't want to risk. But I think there's mystery to Tom Bombadil. It's like, who the heck was he and where did he come from?
It was so confusing. Yeah, it was so good. And like, I think... It's because he wasn't in that movie, man.
I know.
It was because he wasn't in the Ralph Bakshi movie. It's why he wasn't in the live action one.
Okay,
it's still possible. It's still part of my theory.
Right.
It's not my theory. It's something I read online in 2006. And haven't researched again since.
That's so good.
Yeah, he's awesome. But I really do think Eowyn and Faramir. I think. From what I remember, I haven't read the books in 10 plus years now.
Yeah.
I think the last time I read it, I remember thinking, man, there's so much depth to this portion here that's lost in the movie versions.
Yeah, it was really just a passing. As they were walking by, they were together. And you're like, oh, cool, they got together. And that's all you know if you only watch the movies, right?
I gotta go back and read and see why I thought that. And that was my biggest takeaway, actually, from... And how, like, Frodo is, like, in the book, and a little bit in the movie version, how Frodo is damaged. Mm-hmm. And has trauma
deeply
from all the evil he
experienced. He's never the same again, and think of Christ on the cross. You know, there's trauma, there's death, there's wounds and scars that even through resurrection are visible, but now they shine with glory. And so he obviously has to sort through the trauma and figure out. But the glory comes as they get on the ship and travel into the east, right? which is another thing. It's amazing. They're going toward the east. Is that not screaming of resurrection? The east is where the sun rises, and that's the whole reason.
Did you watch the other
have the
new Lord of the Rings show with me?
No, I was not at the watch party because I anticipated it being bad.
It was so bad.
I knew you all were all having that watch party. My brother was with y'all. Y'all had a great time, and I heard all about it, and I was kind of jealous, but at the same time, I was like, I know it's going to be a flop. I just felt it, because as soon as
I know it was too, yeah.
As soon as you were trying to compare it to
Game of Thrones,
I knew. But after that letdown, it was purely to make money and be flashy.
There is a scene
where
Galadriel is on a boat, I think. Yeah. I can't remember. I only watched the first 2 episodes and fell asleep. There's one part I really like. It has like the domestic lives of dwarves, like their home life with the wife and the kids, which was awesome. But that was the only highlight of the show.
That's so sad.
And it actually should have been better than it was, because the actors were great, but the writing was still not there. But in any case, the Galadriel's going to the east or whatever. And she like jumps off the boat right when they get there and starts swimming back. I thought it'd be funny if like every episode for the season they would like pan back to other characters doing stuff and then just pan to her swimming. And then pan back and she's like, still going for a while. But
that would be great.
They didn't do that. And the show was, do they have another season? Are they going to make more?
Dude, I don't even know.
I haven't heard anything about it for a while.
Like, you spend a lot of money just to fail horribly, and it's probably not going to be successful.
There was that Game of Thrones show with the dragons, the prequel show.
Yeah.
I had read a review. I have never watched the show, but I really like Matt Smith, and he's in it. I'd read a review like this. Last night's episode was too dark, and I thought, like, man, for Game of Thrones, that must have been really sickening because they had the Red Wedding and all these terrible things in the show.
Yeah.
And they meant it was like visibly too dark. Like, no one could see what was happening on their screen.
Yeah.
So I thought that was hilarious.
That's bad. That's not good.
Yeah, it doesn't seem very professional.
No. My gosh.
I think that's about all I've got for today.
That's all you've got? Well, I got a few different ones that really hit me.
Do you want to go take a break and then
we'll come back? Let's take a break and we can come back in a second.
Sure. All right. We'll be back with more Spirit and Spire starting soon.
Hey everyone, this week's episode is sponsored by Family Renewal Project. FRP is a local theology of the body apostolate in service to the Archdiocese of Louisville. They're dedicated to renewing the culture through the renewal of the family. They have so many amazing things going on, so check them out at familyrenewalproject.com.
Alrighty, we're back with more Spirit Inspired. Today we're talking about films, Catholicism on films, Christian concepts, virtues, everything to do with films and media.
Yep.
With my wonderful co-host and good buddy. Your dad's name is actually Buddy.
That's right. Well, actually, his name is John.
Is
he
it
goes
really?
by Buddy. Yeah, I'm John.
Because of
Sohl
you?
Third. Yeah, no, he's not. I'm named after him, not the other way.
Well, yeah, I know. I thought maybe you were born and he's like, oh man, he's really a John Sohl.
No, where did he get the nickname?
I should go with Buddy.
No, he when he was a baby, my grandpa John Allen Sohl Sr. called him, he's my little buddy, and the name stuck, so he's always been Buddy. Funnily enough, my grandpa went by Allen, so I'm the only one.
You're the only one. John.
So I think that's kind of cool. But it was particularly funny. Let me finish this thought.
Yeah.
Buddy, whenever we would be going out stuff, one time Dad was given directions to some guy that we randomly drove by on the street, and the guy said, "Thanks, buddy," and he drove off. Matt and I were like, "How do you know him?" And that happened more than once. It was pretty funny.
But did he? Oh,
he didn't know the guy. He was just a total stranger giving him directions, and we thought he knew him.
Because he said his name. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I do think that Johnny Sohl would be a great name.
Yeah.
Is that could be your stage
name? Or Jonathan. It could be my stage name, maybe. But no.
You could be, if you start playing like jazz saxophone or something.
Right. That'd be fun.
Johnny Sohl.
Johnny Sohl.
Yeah, I feel like
I used to be called Soul Train in high school.
Soul Train. Okay.
Yeah, that was my first nickname. And then I got Father Time. I think I mentioned that on another episode where I put the exact second of the bell schedule. I annoyed so many of my teachers with that. And then years later, it made me consider the priesthood. Not really, but there was some aspect of Father Time. I must be called to be a priest. But no, that's not actually an accurate way of discerning your vocation.
You followed those threads back to their root.
Right,
right.
No, it's probably not a good attitude. But some people call me John Sohl. Just no space in my name. So
John Sohl.
Yeah, John Sohl.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Erik Huff. Erik Huff.
Erik Huff, yeah.
Where people to the point where people thought teachers were calling me like Erica.
Erica.
Yeah, because it was so fast. Yeah.
That's true. My gosh. No, I've always loved my name, but I've never taken ownership of it on this level. And I guess that's kind of been with my family. Honestly, I'm trying to figure out a way of transitioning back to the movies, and I failed miserably.
We could just start talking about it again.
I know, that's where
I'm the king of derailing.
No, I loved it. That was good. It's a post-break.
Once there was a movie, and someone in the movie's name was John.
There's back into the topic.
Wow.
This is where you know that we just love talking, and that's why we were called to do a podcast, because we just want to keep hearing ourselves speak. Not really, but the goal obviously is to share truth and to be humble and let that be what, because at the end of the day...
And to hear ourselves talk, John.
Okay, I'm going to destroy you. No. You said a beautiful prayer at the beginning of this, and it speaks to... I don't know how it speaks to these three movies, but I believe the Spirit will help me kind of break it open a little bit.
Just like he helped you... with that transition from your name to the movie.
I might fail at this too.
He gives you the graces for the things you need.
Yeah, it's
this might not be one of those things.
Might not be one of those, but I'll make the humble attempt anyway. But you just prayed that only the good can come from our mouth, and for you to. And we asked the Lord to place only the things on our tongue that were from you. So I immediately was thinking of receiving Holy Communion and the words that we speak, the things that we say. And that includes the words that we have other people say on our behalf through our vision because of what movies can do. The power of media is because of what people say and do in a captured, compelling way that transforms and impacts culture. And so I think of, the three movies that are three, genres, I don't know how you call them, that really impacted me growing up. And that was Back to the Future, funnily enough. Then you have Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And then the final one is Titanic, of all movies, which I might get to a bit.
Two are from the golden age, right? The 80s, I think.
The 80s, that was a golden age.
The 70s were, we were talking about nihilism. They're, like, if you think of all the 70s movies, how depressing they were. Like, even Bad News Bears, they lose at the end. And, like, Full Metal Jacket was in the 80s. Never mind. Full Metal Jacket's the only 80s movie that I can think of that's, like, horrifically dark.
Yeah.
But, like, every movie from the 70s, like The Deer Hunter... stuff like that is just rough.
Yes.
Taxi Driver, it's just all...
You're talking about...
Urban Cowboy,
70s,
all the 70s. Yeah. And then, like, you get to the 80s and it's, like, Big Trouble in Little China and, like, The Goonies. And, like, it's all, like, these fun, Back to the Future, all the Indiana Jones, all these great adventures that are a little campy, but they restore, fun back into movies. And maybe we're in a 70s period now and we'll get to our 80s again. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so you said Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, and then Titanic. I really grew up with that movie. Yeah. Titanic, that's my era. That's a movie that came out when I was a kid. Probably one of the first adult movies I saw in theaters. I don't think my mom knew there was a naked woman in it until after we were already in the movie theater. Shocking.
Right, exactly. I remember my uncle, I didn't get to watch the movie like you did in theaters, which I don't understand why you got to, because though now you told me that nobody even knew that
it was inappropriate.
That there was an inappropriate scene in there, right? What's going on? So my uncle actually had the movie. He dubbed it to VHS tape and took out all the scenes that were questionable, not just the nude scenes. Even I think there was a suicide scene where the guy shoots himself or something terrible.
Oh my gosh!
And I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, I didn't know any of that at 8 years old, so I'm like watching the movie, and
it's
all
like
of a sudden,
watching the made-for-TV version.
Yeah, the screen blacks out, and my uncle put like cheesy 80s music underneath, and we're like, what's going on? And me and Matt are just watching, and all of a sudden the screen comes back. So we learned to fast forward past that, and we kept watching the movie. But I loved the Titanic. Of course, in college, eventually I was able to watch the whole movie. But what that taught me, because I learned that it wasn't all about those scenes, that the whole point. It was almost like, as I watched it as an adult, getting older, I started to realize why I loved that movie so much. Because I was given a chance to enjoy the movie for the sake of the story, and not for the sake of the passion and the romance and the intensity that I think oftentimes people get lost in. And they forget the plot. Just like people can get lost in greed and money and ratings, and they forget the whole story. Think of Rings of Power, or Game of Thrones, or whatever.
Remember Game of Thrones was like the most popular show. And then the last
it was a total letdown.
And then also they had not only was it a letdown in the writing, but you could tell they were phoning it in because there'd be like a Starbucks cup or something in the background that made it into the episode.
So right, and so that's, to me, lazy editing. You don't pay attention because your intentions aren't pure. And so by God's grace, I was given that chance to enjoy that movie rightly, so that when it was time where I could handle it, I guess, I started to see it differently, And I don't know. I think movies like that there's a place for them, right? There's an artistic value that can be lost when you get caught up in the hype of whatever surrounded the movie when it first came out.
It was so hype.
There's so much hype, right? Just like Avatar or all these big movies.
All the James Cameron movies.
Every James Cameron movie that ever came out. There can be so much hype, and you miss the point of the high art that someone is attempting to give you. Now, sometimes...
sometimes you get both, like with Minions. It's high art.
Or Finding Nemo, right?
It's high art.
But
man, it's got a point.
Yeah.
And Minions are remarkable little guys.
Yeah. Until you watch... Well, when I first saw Despicable Me, the first one, that was great. Watching the second one was like, I don't even know what's going on anymore. And then it was all about the Minions. I was like, what just happened? That's right. I referenced that right. Despicable Me.
That's right.
Yeah.
Despicable
Me. It's been a long time.
They made the prequels, Minions the movies. They're
really?
Prequels to the Despicable Me movie. But they have like a new Minion in the last prequel that's not in Despicable Me, but they're making Despicable Me 4 or something that has him in it too.
Dang.
And I'm thinking, they better have an in-universe reason for why he did appear in Despicable Me 1, 2, and 3.
We're thinking universes now, not even just
I'm like, man, I can't. I need
standalone.
I'm big on, it has to make sense in the canon of the universe, of the Minion universe.
Yeah.
Anyways, more about
no
Titanic.
Matter what Minions do, they will never make me cry as much as I did when I finished Toy Story 3. All right? So take that.
That was an existentialist nightmare.
It was. What do you do?
I like the fourth one.
The fourth one was also awesome. It was unexpectedly good. So anyway, back to Titanic and the others. I look at these movies because they were very, and it was like God chose them to be important in my life. It was like I loved Indiana Jones because the Raiders of the Lost Ark. So it was that connection to the Ark of the Covenant, the intense respect for God and his power.
Are they Nazis in that one?
Yeah, they're Nazis and their face melts at the end.
Yeah.
Right, all of that kind of stuff. And so there's that classic, but it was also like they would linger on the shots. They wouldn't like have jump shots 15 every time somebody's doing action. They would literally have Indiana Jones run and they film him running. They don't film him running from 15 different angles and have to show you all the jumps and things and you're constantly flitting from viewpoint to viewpoint. I think it's powerful that they linger on the action. They linger on the moments. They linger on the faces, the expressions. And you don't have to move around. So there was even an ability to pay attention to people in the present moment more back in the 80s than I see today, where it's all CGI and graphics and constant flitting between scenes. Not that there's not value there too. I mean, you can use that effectively.
Sure.
But you can go to extremes.
Quantum of Solace. It's the worst James Bond movie because all it is like, here's a foot, here's a tire, here's the wall. And it's like,
There was so much of that. Oh, yes. But so I loved Indiana Jones, and it ends with the seeking of the lost, the Grail, right? The Holy Grail. And I really connected with that.
Remember everybody just falls into that pit?
Yes. Fall into the pit and disappear. And I love the you have to kneel in humility because otherwise your head gets chopped off, like the whole the journey. And it was always about the mystery of God and the power of God and the respect we should have toward the sacred objects, right? Now, I can't say a whole lot for Temple of Doom. That's a totally different world, different
I like that
plot.
one, yeah.
I also liked it. My wife, Crystal, loved it as well. But those to me were powerful
I like how it starts.
elements.
Where does it start out? Are they in Hong Kong? Beginning of Temple of Doom?
Yes, yeah, something like that. So it was kind of totally out of your normal element of what you expected Indiana Jones to be in. Different, focus, different religion even. And I'm not even going to talk about the fourth one. That doesn't count.
The alien one?
Yeah.
Indiana Jones and the aliens.
Right.
What about the new one, the fifth one?
I'm excited. I don't know what they're going to do. It probably will be, Harrison Ford's last one, but who knows what they're going to do because, CGI is a thing, right? AI. No.
Gosh.
I don't
They're
want
going to have an AI here.
AI Harrison Ford. Oh, that'd be the worst.
Probably land a plane a lot better.
Yeah, probably. Wouldn't be scared of snakes either.
Did you see, have you seen where he's had some issues with landing his planes?
Really?
Yeah, I remember he had a headline where he landed on a golf course, like crash landed, and he was fine. And then also there's like a 747, and it was taken off, and he just flew over it, and he told air traffic control, he's like, "What's that plane doing?" But he was the one who messed up.
That's so funny.
Yeah, he's a little adventurous
Well,
with
that's
his
how it
planes.
is. But then the other, so Indiana Jones, beautiful. And then the other one I wanted to mention was Back to the Future. And to me, it's just simple, fun, but I love the mystery of the fact that Robert Zemeckis won't make another one. He refuses. And it's never been another universe, and let's make it bigger and flashier and crazier. I suspect they'll eventually do it again, remake it, or
don't you think it's a bit of a waste, the fact that they have the original actors are still alive, and despite all the odds with Michael J. Fox,
they could have brought it back.
I didn't like how the third one ended.
Yeah, the third one could have been better on that level. I did enjoy the Old West kind of thing, the theme for obvious reasons, since I'm trying to write that book about the cowboy and all that, which maybe that's its own, spin-off tangent during one of a future episode. But I did enjoy Back to the Future because of the I don't know, time travel is something unique, and it's that idea of just bending time. And do you remember when Isaac was going into that depth, and you and I just went into the Back to the Future mode?
Yeah.
Because he was talking about the center of time being Christ and all of that. So I don't know, I think the plot of a guy going back in time, preventing his parents from meeting, that led to his entire existence not happening, and then having to reclaim that story, but in a way that redeems also the mistakes his father made and mother made, that screams at me of what we're all wanting and wishing we could do.
Right.
There's a lot of brokenness, a lot of pain, a lot of wounds from our past. And when people watch, I can't imagine what actors and actresses must feel when they watch themselves when they're children. Like someone like Miley Cyrus, what she would feel when she's watching Hannah Montana, when she's watching her and her dad actually getting along, whereas today, as far as I know, they've had a really painful fallout, or broken relationships in any Hollywood actor's career, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have to be aware of the sacredness and power that God has given us in the media, that we even have here with Spirit Spire. I think music and movies and and even short YouTube clips or even TikTok shorts, like stupid and silly and seemingly insignificant as they are, they tell a story, they paint a picture, they show and illustrate something. And it's the sacredness of the human person and the story that each of us has. So it requires great responsibility,
Right.
and reverence toward these things, which is why, for me to finish what I was saying about Titanic even, there's reverence toward the human body even, that I think Titanic gets right in many ways, but there's certain ways they get it wrong. And it's profound to me that the moment that Jack and Rose give in to temptation and allow their passions to take over, it's almost like grasping at the gift. Rose so wanted out of her life that she was willing to give her whole self to someone she just met 3 days before on a ship going somewhere, and they'll part ways forever. That's not very responsible or thoughtful, but yet think of the life she was coming from and the suppression and shame and anger and stuff that she had to deal with. And yet the very moments after they gave their whole selves to one another, before marriage, without marriage even being mentioned, is when they hit the iceberg. That is insanely powerful. Speaking of the rupture that takes place in the Garden of Eden, the moment they grasped and ate of the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, I'm just mesmerized by what these movies, specifically one that impacted me so much, can tell you about the human person and our capacity to both receive the gift with patience and love and sacrifice, because Jack redeemed himself. I think it was a call to redemption. That rupture required something of him that he may have not known how to give before. And so on some level, Jack becomes a Christ figure despite that sin. And Rose, of course, being the one who represents all of us longing for a better life, receives the gift that we didn't deserve, that we didn't understand, that we were ready to throw away because she met Jack right when she was getting ready to kill herself. And yet he saved her in a way, a person, in a way only, it was amazing how she painted him as the one. I don't even have a picture of him. He exists only in my memory. It's like this incarnate reality we all long for. Christ.
She wasn't going to jump off the boat, was she?
Yeah, at the beginning of the movie.
Was she?
Yeah, she hated herself. She was ready to die. It's a powerful film.
At the end, whenever she's going to jump off, it's the old lady.
I don't think she was ever going to jump off as the old lady.
No, I think she was kind of like reliving when she was standing on the boat.
Yeah, but she was ready to cast and give the heart of the ocean back, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what that was.
She doesn't.
I don't know.
She lets the one guy touch it, right? He could have taken it from her and pushed her.
I think that's a deleted scene.
It's not in the movie?
No, it's not in the movie. I think that's a deleted scene because that's not...
I'm pretty sure he says, "Can I at least see it?" And then she puts
That's a deleted scene. That's not in the original. You buy the DVD and watch it. It's not in the movie. But
what happens? She just throws it?
She just goes and has this intimate, quiet moment herself and throws it back to her love, right? And then she dies peacefully in sleep. And that's the other thing that really has stuck with me and that has formed me, spiritually speaking. You think of the resurrection of the body. That's what we say every Mass during the Creed. That's one of the most important things. In fact, without the resurrection, our entire faith is in vain, right? As St. Paul says. And so when she dies, after this long life of secrets and depth and longing, where does she go? And I listened to Father Mike Schmidt's short on YouTube where he talked about or it was a talk that he gave, and he was talking about Jack and Rose, and when she dies, she goes back to be with him. And I think that's powerful. And in truth, you can look at that. If you only watch the movie with the hype and the sense of the making the money and the romance and the passion, you can miss the point. Yeah, absolutely. It's not theologically correct to say you fall in love with somebody, you have sex 2 days later, and then when you die, you go be with them. Like, that's stupid, right? Yeah. If you reduce the story and the longing to that caricature. But when you look at it as the depth of longing for redemption that every person has, and Jack being a Christ figure, then suddenly her going back to Titanic were the most important formative things ever happened to her, and Titanic is resurrected. even in the very film, you can see she goes back to the ocean, but then it transforms into this resurrected where everyone's alive again and she's with everyone. And I saw that as the communion of saints surrounding her and Jack's welcoming her so that she can then meet God himself in the ultimate story. I don't see that as a bad thing. Like, my hope is one day, God willing, when I'm at death's door, I would want to see my wife again.
Oh, sure.
You know, I would want to see my mom and dad in those moments, you know? I would want to see my grandma because I would know that they're welcoming me to Christ, to God the Father. Like, that to me is the whole arc of any movie, any story that anyone's ever told. The whole point is to guide you to the ultimate redemption from all this rupture that we've experienced.
Right.
You know? So that's my spiel on movies. I didn't think that would happen to me, you know? But I think that's why people watch movies. That's why people fall in love with these characters.
Right, and that's why we have these archetypes and characterizations, and it is like I said, it's that logos, it's that truth, that beauty, that goodness that can flow through those stories.
Yes. So I'm excited. I think this was a really, really fun episode, Eric. Good topic idea. I thought
you were going to say good talk.
Good talk. Yeah, there you go.
Good talk.
But I'm excited for, you know, maybe in a few months or a couple years, we come back and say, let's talk about some more movies and whatnot. Who knows? Maybe we'll get Father Hardesty to come with us.
Yeah,
that'd be a cool thing. So anyway, that's all I got.
All right. Well, thank you all for watching. Make sure to comment. Put a comment on there. Tell us your favorite movie. Tell us the spiritual theme in a movie. Tell us your favorite cheesy Christian movie. Whatever it is. Make sure to comment, like, subscribe. It'll really help us out. Help spread the word. Help spread this podcast. All right. Until next time, we'll see you with some more Spirit and Spire. Have a good night.